Okay, in this tutorial, I am going to kind of cover some basics of the AlliED mission editor. Um, so first off, we're going to go ahead and start the um, editor. So I have a shortcut set up. So as when you start the editor, depending on how you have it set up, um, it'll prompt you the first time you use it to give you default directories for your stuff, and you just go ahead and set that based on where everything is. And then once you start loading the game up regularly, you'll get a startup prompt, I believe, which is in the options preferences of Allied, um, where you can choose your action based on what you did last time. So you can load an existing mission, create a new mission, or load a last used file. So for the purposes of this tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to just create a completely new mission. Now for this tutorial, we're going to assume a few things. We're going to assume you have Darksaber's Ultimate Craft Pack um, version 2.6 installed with the multiplayer hook, which adds some things to the game, which allow you to create new skirmish missions that kind of sort of operate outside the standard skirmish mission or replaying the um, campaign missions. We can actually create custom missions which will exist in their own folder and not have any effect on your campaign or single player campaign. So before we even bring up X-Wing Alliance, which we don't really even need to do right now, what we need to do is we need to talk about the basics of making a mission. So in Allied, one of the things that is pretty nice is that there is a tool drop down here at the top, and there are several different wizards, if you will, that make things a little easier. One of them is the Hyperbuoy wizard, which allows you to connect regions. You can have up to 4 regions in your missions, and that multiplayer patch allows you to play those multiplayer missions co-op with your friends with missions that utilize hyperspace beacons, which is kind of a neat feature. Anyway, using that, you can um, create that rather simply. We'll go into hyperbuoys probably in a later video. But there is also a button for add a default backdrop, which if I click it, just simply adds a vessel to the ship list, the flight group list, named backdrop. This is the name of the item, but it also affects the color of the backdrop that you choose. Now, with basic Allied, there's this palette of images that the original game uses um, to represent planets and whatnot. Now, if I click on one of these, let's say this one here, um, if you were using Allied on default install of X-Wing Alliance, that is the exact picture that would show up in the game. However, with the update um, Darksaber's patch, a lot of these images have been changed. Some of them are very similar but higher resolution. Some of them are drastically different. But nonetheless, at some point I'm going to create a little um, document that has the updated versions of these images for the latest patch if I can't find it on the forums. Now, um, one of the things that you should know about the backdrops is that some of these planets have multiple versions of them. So like if I click this planet here, which is selection 48, there are different shadow options that you can choose. Now if it's a planet, most of the shadow options are available, but some of the other items, like say for this image of the Death Star, each one of these might be something radically different. So it's almost like a subcategory within the image. Some of the images just have extra images behind them, which Allied doesn't show, and some of them are just the shadows. So we're just going to click this, full on. We can change the color. Let's change it to like a pink color, since this is sort of a, or maybe this color here, since that's sort of the color. Close enough to the planet, it would be emitting that kind of light, but maybe not very bright. Now, once I click that, you'll notice that the name of that flight group changed, and that is basically the color of what I chose. Now, I also have the ability to change the size and the brightness. Brightness I'll maybe bring down, since it's not a sun, it's just reflected light. Bring it down to maybe 0.4. The size, anywhere between 2 and 0.5 probably works. But that is just basically window dressing. One of the other things that Darksaber's Ultimate Craft Pack adds is a lot of widescreen resolutions for updated monitors and updated systems. However, what you'll notice is when you're playing the game, the star field isn't as brilliant, and I feel like that has a lot to do with the stretching of a wider screen and the way the engine handles the star field in the background. It's not a skybox like it is in other games. I think it's actually rendered by the engine itself. I think those points of light, which represent the stars in that game, are actually like, it's not an image. I think it's actually generated. Until somebody figures out how to make that star field more brilliant, we have other solutions for making missions in later versions of the craft pack. One of those is creating your own skybox. One of the ways that we do that is by creating in the 3D space a square image of Starfield on the top, the bottom, left, right, and front and back of the world space. So, for instance, if this image here, the XY that I'm at right now, is a top-down look at the space, what we can do is we can add a star field here, 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 and here. And that covers front, back, left, and right. And then in the side view, which now we're looking at everything on the side. So this X-wing you can see is kind of on the side. We would also need to create one here and here in order to completely fill in the skybox. That's kind of an arduous process, but what I do have is an example of me using that in other missions. So if I go into my combat mission folder and pull up an old mission, I can take these backdrops, which are left, right, front, back, left, right, and then in the side view here we have top and bottom. So what I can do is I can actually click this flight group library button, and with all those backdrops selected, I can copy all those to here. Okay. Now, if I open back up my, let's close this. We'll create a new mission. All right, now we're back at the new mission. Let's go ahead and insert our backdrop so we don't have to do it manually. So we're going to select them all, then we're going to click this button, Add Library Selections to Mission. What that does is that plops all these directly into the mission. Now, the way I have it set up is these show up in a certain difficulty level, okay? And I'm going to explain why I do it this way. So if I don't specify that these show up at a certain difficulty level, they're always going to be visible in the game, no matter which angle I'm looking at. So if I were to say add a Star Destroyer, so let's go over here, let's create a Star Destroyer, let's just make a Victory class Star Destroyer. Now we're looking at a top-down view of the Star Destroyer. We see the backdrop on all four sides, front, back, left, right. There's also one in the top and the bottom right here in the center, which I can't see until I turn the image on its side. There's the top, there's the bottom. The problem is, without making those backdrops sort of invisible until I really need to mess with them, when I go to grab this Star Destroyer, I accidentally grab the backdrop, which I don't want to do. So, my solution is I go in and I select all of these backdrops. Let's actually fix this. Let's move this back, which we can do by fixing its start position. So 0, 0, then boom, it's back where it needed to be. Okay, so now in order to fix that so that I can't see these nor can I mess with them, what I do is I select all the backdrops and I go into arrival and I set the arrival to difficulty level easy. Wait a minute. Yeah, easy. Okay, so the thinking there is if you just boot up default X-Wing Alliance, I think most of you have it set on medium. I don't know how many of you actually mess with it. However, if you boot up the game and it's set on medium, it's still going to have these backdrops from easy in medium. But what I have the ability to do is down here at the bottom left-hand corner, I have the ability to filter out icons that only show up in certain difficulty levels. So if I click medium, those backdrops disappear. They're still in the game, but now I can't accidentally click them. That's just one little thing that I used so that they don't get in the way. Now, we can imagine that they're still there. If I click the easy button, they pop back in. But we're going to go ahead and filter them out so that they're not in the way. Now, here's the thing. By default, if you choose any of the missions that have been updated by any of the various people that have been working on this project, this Skybox addition to each of the missions has a plain starfield on the top and bottom, and then a hazy starfield around the periphery, front, back, left, and right. Now, sometimes it looks good. However, when you have certain backdrops in front of that haziness, it shows like a very strange black outline. And honestly, most of the time, I would think that your starfield, if you're not in any sort of wild nebula type space, you're just going to have plain starfield on top, bottom, left, right, front, and back. So what I do is I take the settings for the top and bottom starfield, which are just plain starfield, and that's option 55, and it's the second to last shadow level, and that will populate a starfield. But I set that for the top, the bottom, the left, the right, and the front and back. So now, if I boot up the mission, I should have Starfield, brilliant Starfield that I can see in the game via a skybox in all directions. Now, you'll notice that the brightness level of the skybox is 0, so the world space would be dark. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a default height backdrop again. Okay, so it pops that in. Now, I can drag this over here, and the way this works is if you think about no matter where you are on this map, okay? So let's say you're, 5, 6, 7 kilometers away from the center point, okay? You're not going to be looking this direction to see the backdrop. The backdrop is plastered on the world space, and no matter how far away you get from the center, it's still going to be in the same spot in the world space. So even if my craft is here, the backdrop is going to appear in this direction from me. So if you can think about it this way, when you put that backdrop real close to the center there, it's just easy to get an idea of where it is. But it would be more important to put that backdrop way over here. That would give you a better sense of which way you would be looking to see it. If that makes sense, then maybe do it that way. So you can see if I put it that way, all the way out there, I have to look this direction to see it. It's the same even if I put it right there. I still have to look all the way out here to see it. That may not make sense until you start messing with it, but nonetheless, that's how it works. Now, if we look at it from the side view, you can see that it's on the lateral plane. Now, if you want to just kind of edge it up a little bit so it's a little higher off the lateral plane, you can do that. Now you have a planet, which we can specify what it looks like. Let's just say this one, and we'll do half crescent, and we'll change the color to some sort of brown, and then we can change the size to, let's say, 1.5. its brightness, we'll say, is like 0.4. Now, one of the things you have to consider is that